it was just the thing to do, and I honestly don't even remember the first time I got drunk or the first time I smoked pot, but I was probably 12 or 13 the first time I drank. And obviously at that age, I wasn't doing it quite regularly, but when I was about 15, I started smoking pot. And that was my first like real love. Like the obsession kicked in like right away. And it was hard for me to get away with drinking at that age. But the pot I could get away with a lot easier. And I mean, the mental obsession took over right away. I was really, really good golfer when I was a kid, played in golf tournaments all over the state. And that was my passion in life. And when I started smoking pot, like it completely changed who I was. Like I mean, it changed the way I dressed, it changed the people I hung out with, the music I listened to. Um, you know, my grades in school went to shit, my golf game went to shit. And it basically took over my life. So yeah, so anyway, started smoking pot and drinking in probably 9th, 10th grade. It instantly caused, a lot of problems with the family. I got first introduced to AA when I was 16. My parents, that was all my mom forcing me to go. And I really resented her for it. I thought I was just like everybody else, just having fun on the weekends and things like that. They kept, threatening me, like, if you don't stop using, we're going to send you to rehab and this and that. And eventually that happened. In the fall of 10th grade, I got busted again, and my parents were going to send me to a rehab somewhere. And I volunteered to go to a place called the Faith Home, which is a Christian rehabilitation for alcoholics and drug addicts. It was free. It was a horrible experience. It was kind of way out in the country somewhere. I was really young. I didn't feel like I had a problem. I thought I was just like all the other kids, drinking on the weekends, smoking pot and stuff like that. All the men that were there were much, much older than me. This is in the mid 90s, and most of them were addicted to crack or like really bad alcoholics. And I couldn't relate. And so that was supposed to be an 8-week program. And I ended up running away from there after 5 weeks, and made a long walk to the nearest gas station and used a payphone and called my mom and told her I wasn't coming home. So I ended up moving in with my dad. And with my dad, he had a lot more leniency for me to party and drink and stuff. So I got away with a lot more. And that's when the alcohol really kicked in, when I was living with him, because I didn't have the curfews and things like that. Had a DUI my senior year, like in the fall. Had an accident, like it was a 3-car accident. And at the time I still didn't really think I had a problem. And so from there, back then they had something called ASAP, and you were supposed to go like one night a week for 6 weeks or something to get your license back. And after talking to my counselor a few times, and being somewhat honest but not fully honest, they decided that I needed to be an inpatient or not inpatient, but intensive outpatient treatment or something. And so it was 4 meetings a week for 3 hours a night for 6 weeks, and you couldn't miss a meeting. And on the last week of the program, I missed a meeting, and they told me I had to go take a drug test. And of course, I was smoking pot the whole time. Got a friend to pee for me, and went to the doctor's office or whatever, and used his pee sample. And they said, "Have a seat and drink some water. We don't test the first sample." So got kicked out of that class and owed him all the money. And at that time, you know, my solution was, well, I'll just never drive again, you know, screw it. Because I couldn't imagine like going 6 weeks without drinking or using drugs. And at the age of 19, I moved to Colorado. You know, I wanted to get as far away from my family as I could and just get out of a small town where everybody's in your business. And so I saved up as much money as I could. I had a job and I moved to Colorado at 19 with a buddy of mine and didn't know anybody. And got a job in Colorado, and I had a friend back home who had visited, you know, who had spent some time in Boulder. This was in Boulder, Colorado, and he had spent some time there. And he said, one thing you need to do is like stay away from the hill. The hill is like this little area of town, kind of like where all the bars and the college kids and hang out and stuff. And it was a place that was well known where you could go and find drugs or whatever. And of course, the first thing I did was go there. And I happened to be at a party one night, and I met up with a guy who was actually friends with the buddy of mine who told me not to go there. And so I started hanging out with him, and we were like total hippie kids. I mean, I had dreadlocks down halfway down my back, and he kind of taught me the ropes of like, you know, selling pot and you know, kind of on the streets to strangers. And you know, he ended up moving away, and he gave me his pager with all his contacts and everything. So I quit my job and just decided that, you know, I could just sell pot and make a living. And that's when, so for the next 5 years, it was just a party every day. You know, I was young, and it was actually a lot of fun at that time. You know, it was before the alcohol and drugs had really kicked in, like as far as like the dependency and stuff. It was just, you know, had a lot of fun. I traveled around the country, went to concerts and things like that. And that lasted for about 5 or 6 years. And then I kind of started realizing, like, you know, I'm 25 years old, you know, it's probably time for me to get a job and settle down or something. And so I cut my hair, moved back to South Carolina, and I wanted to follow my dreams back of playing golf, you know, and I hadn't played golf since I was like 16 or 17. Actually quit the high school team my senior year. I'm skipping around a lot, sorry, but that bothered me a lot. I was, you know, one of the best players on the team, and I quit, and they ended up winning the state championship without me. But anyway, so I decided I would go back home and get a job at a golf course and try to concentrate on that, and maybe I could be like a teaching pro or something. And so that didn't really work out. You know, by this point, I was getting really involved in doing lots of cocaine. You know, I was, oh my God, drinking every night, as always. And I just couldn't take that structure of having like a real job and getting up, going to work at 6 in the morning and shaving and all that stuff after, you know, not kind of doing my own thing for so many years. So I moved back to Colorado, and got a job actually working in a stone yard, which is where I still work today. And so, you know, things progressed. You know, the drinking got worse. Like, sorry, I'm kind of lost here. Yeah, just like everybody, you know, things just got worse and worse. I started to get in 2012. We had a big flood in Colorado, and I always remember when this happened because of the flood. But I ended up in a hospital I went on a bender and ended up in the hospital, you know, from drinking. And And I always knew that I was an alcoholic, and it didn't really faze me that much. I thought it was just like, it runs in the family, whatever. But at this time, that's when things really got serious for me for the first time, and I was actually kind of concerned um, about my drinking. Um, I'd never really had withdrawals like that before, and I decided that maybe I needed to start like kind of taking it easy and slowing it down. The doctor in the hospital, she tried to talk me into going to detox and getting some help, but I didn't think it was that bad. I thought, I can handle this, and I can slow it down. I left there with a prescription of Ativan, and I didn't drink for a few days, and that was probably the only days that I went without drinking since I graduated from high school. So after that, it kind of wasn't all that much fun anymore. It was, I was always kind of concerned about, ending up like the rest of my family, where where it was going to kill me or whatever. So I did the best I could to kind of control it, but it never worked. I always ended up drunk, and I was never ever able to take days off. So yeah, so things just they progressed. At that time, I was in a long-term relationship with the girl. I ended up moving with her to where she was from in Alabama, and thought that maybe a fresh start there would help things out. And instantly, it seemed like wherever I went, I was always able to find the drugs, and cocaine was a pretty big part of my life by then. Pretty daily user. Ended up breaking with her and moved back to Colorado. And at that point, not having her around, things really progressed. Just got to the point where I wanted out, but I just didn't know. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't really. I always thought that it was more of like that I was weak, that like I should just be able to slow it down during the week and party on the weekends. I had no idea how bad it really was. Like, I was probably suffering from withdrawals a lot longer than I realized. Sunday nights for me, I remember, were just absolutely horrible. I would drink all day, Saturday, Sunday, get up in the mornings, drink all day, and then Sunday nights I would suffer. And with the nightmares, cold sweats, and all that stuff. And I didn't really realize how bad it was. And I always thought that I could somehow just slow it down. So, in the big book, it talks a lot about, things we do to control our drinking, switching from scotch to brandy and beer to wine and things like that. And for me, it was always drugs. Like, I tried to control my drinking with drugs. If I had Xanax, if I had Klonopin, if I had Ativan, then I could slow it down and not drink as much and not have the withdrawals at night and things like that. So that was one drug that I didn't really abuse. Whenever I could get my hands on it, like, it was like gold, and that was something I was always after. Eventually, and all this stuff, a lot of it's just kind of a blur for me. Pretty much drank to almost a blackout for like 20 years, but I was able to kind of keep things under control as far as keeping my jobs and stuff. But at some point, I finally started taking that drink in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep, because I had horrible sleeping habits. And at some point I was just like, you know what, like, what's it gonna hurt to have a couple shots at 3 a.m. to go back to sleep, so I don't feel like shit and I can get up and go to work. And so I started doing that, and so things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I was really depressed. Just just wasn't really much fun anymore. My friends never really called me to go to parties or go to bars anymore, because they knew like 7 or 8 at night, like I was done, like I'd been, I would have already been drinking all day. And then like probably the 3 years before I went to Pavillon, it was like this perfect storm of everything. I was always a big partier. There wasn't anything I wouldn't really do, but I was always against opiates. Like they made me sick. I knew how addictive they were. It just wasn't my thing. I mean, if I was ended up in some weird place and people were smoking crack, whatever, I would do it. If it was meth, whatever, ecstasy, acid, anything, I was all game. But opiates were the one thing that I kind of stayed away from, and they made me sick, and I just didn't like it. And then I kept lowering my standards, like the places I went. I kept my local bars kept getting more and more seedy and more trashy, and then this one bar I would go to every day. This old guy, he had a prescription for oxys, and he started trading them to me for pot. And so I back that up a little bit. I had a lot of like really bad back issues as well. So that's part of that whole perfect storm. I had bulging discs, L2 and L3. Went to the hospital on a couple different occasions, emergency rooms. They shot me up with Dilaudid, gave me prescriptions for Percocet and things like that. And I started to kind of take a liking for the pain pills. I would tell the doctors that they made me sick, and they would give me nausea medicine. So I ended up kind of taking a liking for that. And then this guy started trading them to me, and they still would make me sick. And I always thought, well, it's because I drink too much, and I gotta, maybe if I don't drink as much, I can then I can use these opiates. And so it really, I started, my body got used to it, and it did make me sick. And I really liked it because it really like cut my drinking down big time. And I didn't have the hangovers, didn't have the hard time sleeping and the cold sweats and all those things. So that was kind of quickly became my drug of choice. And that kind of fizzled out. That connection kind of left. And then and I was so after one of my back episodes, I was laying in bed. I was pretty much bedridden for like a couple weeks. And I had my pain pills and a bottle of whiskey in the bed. And I had a buddy of mine, he came by the house and was like, let's go get up, we're getting out of bed, let's go see this guy named JR. And he's passed away now, but he was, one of my many coke dealers over the years. And so I go into JR's place, and I got a golf club, and I could barely walk, and I'm limping around. I'd known this guy for a long time, and he's like, you look like you're in really bad shape. I got something that can help you out with that. And I was like, what are you talking about? So he pulled out some heroin. I'd only tried heroin once in my life when I was about 20, and it about killed me. And it made me extremely sick. And I was at this, I used, and then I knew I was in trouble. I'd been drinking all day and taking other drugs. And after I used the heroin, I like instantly went to a buddy's house because I was like kind of scared. I got there, and they were using cocaine, so I thought that would help me out, to lift me back up. And anyway, it was a bad situation. It made me really, really sick, and I swore I would never do that again. And months later, I ran into some guys that were there that night, and they said, we left that house because we didn't want to be there when you died. They were like, you were close to something really bad happening. And that scared me pretty good. And so I always stayed away from that stuff. But at that moment, when my back was in so much pain and everything, I was like, sure, why not? You know. And so I used, and right away it didn't like catch on. You know, I always had that in my back of my mind that like I knew somewhere that I could get it if I really wanted to. And months later, um, I was sitting at the bar. They weren't even open yet, and I was sitting there drinking, and I was just miserable. I mean, I just absolutely hated my life. The alcohol and the cocaine just were not working anymore. I could never find that sweet spot, that buzz I wanted. It was just like it was either not enough or too much, and I was sick. And I thought to myself, like, you know, I really want to. I just didn't want to feel the way I felt, so I made the decision to call this guy, and and you know, and in a weird way, like I felt like I went out like searching for my bottom. Like I wanted help, but I didn't think I was like in bad enough shape to ask for help. I don't know what I was thinking, you know, but AA never crossed my mind. Treatment was like, oh, I got a job and it's too expensive and this and that. And I kind of made this decision like, well, fuck it, I'll just start using heroin and that's going to make me hit my bottom. Or if my family finds out, you know, maybe they'll have an intervention or something, you know. And so I went over to this guy's house, and for the first time, I actually, you know, bought some, paid for it, so I used that day, and it was kind of like the first experience I had. It made me unbelievably sick. You know, I went to this girl's house that I was hanging out with, and she kind of took care of me that night. And the next morning, she was like, "Well, I bet you'll never do that again." Like she wasn't even mad at me because she knew how sick I was, and I couldn't wait to go home and try it again. It was, you know, and that's just kind of the insanity of my disease and, you know, difference between a normal person and somebody that's an addict. Like, I don't know why I would want to put a substance back in my body that made me so sick, but I did. And, and it, you know, so I started to get used to it and where it didn't make me sick. And what it did was it like, at first things were okay. It kind of like I felt like it cured my alcoholism. Like I cut my drinking in half by like 60%. I mean, I hardly drank near as much as I did. So I was sleeping at night, the hangovers were gone, and I started out, you know, I was really good about it. I would just use a little bit in the evenings, and that worked for a really short period of time, but rather quickly I got really hooked on it bad where, you know, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't function without it. And that went on for a couple years. And you know, it just took me to a really dark place. Part of that, you know, perfect storm was like when that all happened, like my car payments were just done. I had a bunch of money in the bank. Um, like, you know, and at first it was really inexpensive. Then before you know it, it was my whole paycheck was gone every week. And it was all I could do to just stay well. You know, it didn't get me high anymore or anything. So, you know, I tried to clean up on my own a bunch of times. I never could do it. I went home one time and tried to detox for a week at my family in South Carolina. As soon as I got back, I started using again. And then in December of 2018, I gave this guy the last of the money I had, and he was going to score for me, and it was going to be enough to get me through the week to where until I got another paycheck. And something happened. He basically ripped me off or whatever. And I was driving home, and I had a pretty calm feeling, like, you know what? You know, I knew I was going to be really sick, but I was just so tired of it. I was so tired of like all I could ever think about was getting high and how to get more. And not running out, and am I going to have enough to get through the day, and all these things. And at that moment, I was like, when is this going to end? I was like, my credit cards are maxed out. I don't have a penny in the bank. I'm going to be sick for days. Like, how am I going to get to work? And I was over it. I was just so sick and tired of living that way. And I couldn't see any other way out. And I had mentioned to my cousin before about what I was going through when I tried to get clean on my own. And he had been to Pavillon a few years back. And he planted the seed in my head, like, have you ever thought about, going somewhere and getting some help? And at that time, I was like, no, I'm just going to, I'm home. I'm going to get 10 days under my belt, and I'll go back to Colorado and I'll be fine. And so I called him, and we talked for a while, and he was like, will you talk to somebody? He's like, if I put you on the phone with a friend of mine from Pavillon, like, would you call him and talk to him? And I said, sure, whatever, and so I called this stranger up that I didn't know anything about, and we talked for a while. And at that moment, I made a decision that I would go to Pavillon, and that was the best decision I ever made in my life. When I got to Pavillon, it was tough. I was in detox for 4 days. I was totally hooked on heroin, alcohol, cocaine, Xanax. I mean, the last 2 years, I never drew a sober breath, and I was constantly putting something in my system. But I worked really hard at Pavillon. I ended up going to extended care, which was huge for me. Got out of Pavillon and thought that, I got enough time under my belt, and I can just go to meetings and I'll be fine. I had a really hard time when I first got out, like staying away from old friends. One of the first places I went was the bar I used to hang out at. I wanted everybody to see me, and I'm healthy and I'm looking good and stuff. And I started back smoking pot again right away. And instantly I knew that felt pretty bad. But my disease kept telling me that it's okay. It's legal. It's not addictive. As long as you're not drinking, you're okay. As long as you're not doing the other drugs, you're fine. But within weeks, I was back doing cocaine all the time. And I went to meetings. The one thing that saved me that first year I was at a Pavillon was I kept going to meetings every day. I went to meetings, whether I was, clean or not. It took me like 5 months to get a sponsor. I finally got a sponsor, and he had me do a written first step. And this sponsor, I told him, I was like, I'm not going to quit smoking pot. I was like, I just want to stop doing cocaine. I don't want to drink. I don't want to do heroin anymore. And he's like, well, whatever. We'll worry about that later, And so he had me do a written first step, and I kind of didn't realize that my life was unmanageable. Like I had to have him explain to me unmanageability, because, like, sure, I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drug addict, but up until that point, I was able, before I went to, it was slipping away really fast, but, I paid my bills. I kept my job. I didn't have problems with the police. Somehow or another, I stayed out of trouble, and things were slipping away fast, but I didn't realize how unmanageable my life was. And he had me do a written step on unmanageability, and I wrote like 20 pages on unmanageability. And that was a huge eye opener for me. That unmanageability part to me is as important as it is to accept that I'm an addict. Because if I feel like my life is manageable, then I'll try to use again. So that was like a real eye opener. And when I read those pages back to him, it brought tears to my eyes. And when I was trying to remember events that happened throughout my life, and I looked through an old high school annual from the 10th grade, and I was reading what people wrote in there, and all these old friends were, these friends that were girls and stuff, they were like, you've changed, you're not the same person you used to be, I wish we had gotten closer, but we drifted apart. And all that time I thought I was just like everybody else, just, and that broke my heart to realize like how long that I had been using, and how long it had affected me, and my friends and my family, you know, what I'd put them through over all these years and the denial I was in that it was a problem. But unfortunately, I still wasn't done. You know, I ended up relapsing again on the harder drugs, and and it just, that sponsorship kind of fizzled out. You know, he wanted me to get 60 days clean before he could move to step 2, and I just never could do it. And then something happened that for me, it was, you know, my higher power doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I ran into an old friend of mine in like a hardware store. And this guy I had used with for many years. He had lived with me for a period of time, and I knew how he drank and I knew how he used drugs. And when he saw me, you know, he had disappeared a couple of years ago, and I didn't know what had happened to him, and I was kind of resentful of him. But when he saw me, I could tell he didn't want to talk to me. And we came up, and I was like, "Hey, you know, I went to treatment." He's like, "That's awesome. You know, I've been clean for 2 years. You know," and I was like, "Really?" So I got honest with him that I was, you know, that I was going to meetings, but I wasn't really clean, and I was struggling. And I started going to NA meetings with him, and that, you know, you'll hear in the rooms that, like, you hang around long enough, you'll hear your story. And seeing him, how much his life had changed, and hearing him share in meetings, like, it just changed everything for me. And I wanted what he had, and it was for the first time that I really, really wanted to get clean, and you know, I wanted to be able to carry myself the way he did. And so, you know, I went to NA. I started going to NA, and I didn't pick up a white key tag for probably 4 or 5 meetings because I wanted to be really, really sure that I wanted to do it. You know, I was always been afraid of failure. And so on July 11th of 2020, I picked up a white key tag, and I haven't had to use since. And my life has been so much better since then. I mean, when I left Pavillon, it took me a year and a half to get 30 days of clean time. But, you know, I kept coming back, and I kept trying. I got a sponsor right away, and we started working the steps. And it became clear to me that people that had what I wanted, they worked steps. And that was what I was missing the whole time, was, you know, just that commitment to recovery. And that's what, you know, it was for me. Is like, I made a commitment that I'm going to do the steps, and I'm going to stay sober. And one of my members of my home group, he always says, you know, when we focus on the solution, the problem goes away. And that was my experience. Like, my obsession to use was lifted probably within a month or 2, after I started really diving into the steps. My first sponsor actually bailed on me. Like, he went back out. He just ghosted me, quit answering. And his sponsor told me, if you can't ever get a hold of Chris, you call me. And so I'd made it to the first 3 steps, and this guy disappeared. So I called his sponsor. And to me, that's, you know, I was finally willing to go to any length. You know, I could have easily used that as an excuse. Well, my sponsor's gone, like, I can just stop working the steps or whatever. But I called him, and we immediately picked right back up into working the steps, and started writing my 4th step with him. And it took me a while to get through the steps, but you know, that's been the biggest difference. You know, I started actually participating in recovery, and that's been, you know, it's been really big for me, is to, like, chair meetings. You know, I got a service position. I just jumped right in, and haven't looked back. And you know, I was kind of expecting, like, a lot of, like, these major changes as I was going through the steps. You know, like step 3, I thought was going to be like inspirational or something. And honestly, I didn't really, you know, when I look back now, I can see how far I've come. But as I was working through them, I didn't get a lot of the effects that others have until I got to step 9. This past March, I got to go home make amends to my family. I got to write a letter to all, I wrote letters to them so I wouldn't leave anything out. I got to go to my father's grave and make amends to him. And it was a beautiful experience. It's like a whole nother level of accountability, and like a whole, just made me that much more motivated to stay sober after making these amends. And no, that was a big deal for me. And today, I go to meetings pretty much every day. I probably average 6 or 7 meetings a week. I have an NA sponsor, but I don't go to NA anymore. I have an AA home group. I chair meetings on Monday nights. And I just have, the amount of freedom I have today is just unimaginable. I went years and years without even having a driver's license to, being afraid to go anywhere, to getting arrested. And today I can get in my truck any time of day and go wherever I want. All the hobbies and things that I used to love to do, I do more than ever. I have a girlfriend in the program, my roommates in the program. That was one of the hardest things for me was to get rid of all my negative people in my life, all my old friends. And one thing I wanted to kind of finish with, one of my favorite parts of the big book, I wanted to read that. And it says, this is from page 45 on We Agnostics: lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find the power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how are we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. And that's just, to me, that's so profound. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself. It doesn't say the main object is to help you quit drinking or anything like that. And that's what recovery is all about for me, is having this relationship with the God of my understanding that'll help me stay sober. I can't stay sober on the fellowship. I can't stay sober on meetings. That first year I went to meetings every day. I would leave during the middle of the meetings and go use. It's the work I've done outside the meetings. It's the one-on-one with my sponsor. It's getting honest and doing the stuff I don't want to do is what keeps me sober. Meetings are a crucial part of my program, but it's getting involved with the steps and the work with my sponsor that's really changed my life. I start out every day getting connected before I even get out of bed. That's my first thing I do every morning is get connected to my higher power. And when shit hits the fan, I go to prayer. That's I learned how to pray at Pavillon. I'd never prayed before in my life, and it's changed my life completely. And I know I missed a lot of things that I wanted to share about, and but it's been a privilege to be able to do this. Feels really good. Never dreamed that I would be sober and sitting here doing something like this. And with that, I think I'm done. Thanks.